Why the tabernacle? On Sunday mornings at church, we've been going through the Old Testament, and last week Mark finished the Exodus, and we'll be moving on to the rest of the law, but there was a number of topics that I wanted to cover and discuss found in the book of Exodus itself, and one of those was the tabernacle. So today I want to look briefly, very shortly, at the idea of the tabernacle and what it might apply to us today. First of all, what is the tabernacle? Just a quick verse, Exodus 25, God is speaking to the Israelites and he says, "And let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell in their midst." So God is telling them to make the tabernacle as a sacred space for him to dwell in the midst of a camp of sinful Israelites. So a sanctuary in the middle of their camp. So that is the purpose of the tabernacle. Not to be confused with the temple. Many years later, the temple would be built in Jerusalem. As you can see, compared to the tabernacle, it is a permanent building, ornately decorated, designed to be there in its final resting place, whereas the tabernacle is a tent. The tabernacle is designed to be set up and taken down and moved. The tabernacle is used when the camp of the Lord is on the move. The difference, one is a building built by King Solomon in Jerusalem, when the king is reigning in a final location. That is the temple. The tabernacle is a tent that is to be assembled before the Israelites entered into Canaan, before they had a king, before their final situation was set up. The tabernacle is temporary, designed to be moved. Here is a brief layout of the tabernacle. There's basically three sections. There's the outer court. As you can see, it's the giant black rectangle with the laver and brazen altar in it. Inside that is the holy place where the priests could go. And behind a veil is the Holy of Holies, or the most holy place. And in that is the Ark of the Covenant. Now I want to notice just the diagram. The reason I picked this specific diagram, there were others that were slightly better, but I want to look at the top of the Ark of the Covenant. Notice there are the two cherubim with their wings pointed inward, but in between, notice there's nothing there. It's just an empty space. So notice that. But inside the most holy place is where the special presence of God was said to exist. So, three concentric rings of protection to keep sinfulness and impurity out. And as you get closer, fewer and fewer people are able to access that. Ultimately, the priests can access the holy place. Only the high priest can access the most holy place. That is where the most intimate presence of God resides. Now, what is this? This is an artist rendition of a picture of the war camp of Pharaoh Ramses the Great. He's a pharaoh that was reigning around the time of Israel's formation, and this picture shows the camp that he set up when he was at war. Now, Ramses didn't live like this all the time. This is only when he was on the move, moving from place to place, fighting. So let's look at the organization of his war camp. First of all, you have the outer court. That is the giant rectangle where all of his soldiers and chariots and workmen are doing their daily duties. But inside, notice on the right, there's the dark rectangle. Those are his people serving him, taking care of his needs. But then on the right, there's a third section on the inside. And notice there are two winged beings with their wings pointed inward, and on the inside is not a man, but a symbol of the one who would consider himself a god king, Ramses himself. Now this symbol isn't a picture of him, but it's a representation of him. You could say it's the king's image. But if we go back to the previous picture, notice there is no image on the Ark of the Covenant. Something interesting. This pharaoh has an image to represent him. But again, I want to look at these two pictures side by side, and you can see there are some striking similarities. You've got the war tent of Pharaoh on the right with the outer court and the inner court, and then the most special place of his presence. And you've got the tabernacle. You've got the outer court. You've got the holy place where the priest can go, and behind this curtain is God's special presence in the Ark of the Covenant. See the similarities? Okay. What was the tabernacle doing? At the end of Exodus, chapter 40, we read that the Exodus served as the dwelling place of Yahweh, the God of Israel, while he was traveling in the wilderness before entering Canaan. So while Israel was in the wilderness, The tabernacle served as the dwelling place of God. God's glory would fill it when they were stopped, but when they needed to move, he would depart and they would follow. God's presence was seen as a cloud by day, fire by night, and in more than that, it was symbolized by the Ark of the Covenant, which even traveled ahead of Israel as they crossed the Jordan River before entering the Promised Land. So the tabernacle was in the midst, and it was a sacred space to hold God's presence. Now, we might say God is everywhere, yes, but there is an aspect where God's presence was specifically in his temple. That's where he wanted to be worshipped. Now, let's look at God's presence as fire. At the end of Exodus, we see God's glory filling the tabernacle as a cloud and fire descend upon it. So, when they finish the tabernacle, people cheer because God's glory is filling the tabernacle, and that's symbolized by cloud and fire. Acts 2, we read about the Holy Spirit filling the followers of Jesus as fire descends upon their shoulders. Okay, 1 Corinthians 6:19, you can see it on the screen. Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have received from God? So our bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit. There is no tabernacle, there is no temple anymore. We function as that role. Let's think about temple versus tabernacle. Someday Jesus is going to be seated as king over the earth. Remember, the Pharaoh in this picture, this is not his final resting place. This is not where he rules and reigns and does all of his thing. This is not his home. This is him at war. Someday Jesus is going to be seated on the throne in his temple as king over the earth. And when that happens, we will be finished, perfected. We will be with him in the new heavens and the new earth. And the war against sin, death will be over. But for now, the war rages, whether between spiritual forces, new man versus old man, followers of Christ versus sinful humanity. The war rages on, and we acknowledge that we are sojourners in this life. This is not our final resting place. This is not where we belong. Just like the children of Israel didn't belong in the wilderness, they belonged in the promised land. We look forward to the land ahead. 1 Peter 2:11 speaks of us as sojourners and exiles, those who don't belong. We can think of ourselves as mobile battle stations, as tabernacles, to take God's presence where we go. Jesus' final resting place isn't in our hearts, but he's on the move. We are the tabernacles of the Holy Spirit as Yahweh is still on the move, conquering the enemy and bringing new life wherever he goes. If his work on earth was finished, he would return. He has not finished. He is still at war. Therefore, because we are mobile battle stations, we are tabernacles of the Holy Spirit, we can go to war, folks, against the deceitful desires of our sinfulness, knowing that God's presence is with us, warring beside us. We are not alone in this battle. So, takeaway, folks, let's follow Yahweh into battle.